Welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Join us here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first. A former college professor, Raymond C. Shea, has dedicated his life to raising awareness about climate change. This is his second book on the subject, the first published with Page. It is entitled The Winds of Change, the novel about the fate of mankind. So the environment obviously has always been a big part of your life, right?
Well, I grew up in a family that I guess you could call were environmentalists. We were always out camping and in nature. And so with that mindset growing up, this book is really about everyone's responsibility when it comes to helping mitigate the serious effects of climate change. And it's not just the weather patterns that we've been experiencing. It's about the economic and political and personal lifestyle choices we make that ultimately bring about some of the catastrophic weather conditions we've been witnessing.
You think someday, we'll hear maybe no one say there's no such thing as climate change, because there are people who like to say that. There's no such thing as climate change. We'd be going through this anyway. We had the ice age, look throughout time. Will people finally just accept that maybe we're contributing to an acceleration of climate change? Isn't that the bottom line?
It is. There's been many epics in the life of this planet. And yes, certainly we've gone through ups and downs. But there's one thing that's happening today that's never happened before, and that's the level of our personal consumption, essentially, that I write about in the book really affects the changes in the climate that we're experiencing.
Now, you talk about, it's up to us. People will say to me, why are you separating your plastic from your garbage? It all goes to the same place anyway. They tell us it's not.
I've actually questioned that myself, and I've reached out to Waste Management. It's one of the largest collectors of refuse in the world, reusable refuse, and they assure me that there's long lines of people separating the plastics and the metals on the line. So I've never been to one of their facilities, but I'll have to believe that.
All right. So your main character is a guy named Thomas Blackhawk, described as a professional environmentalist and descendant of the Algonquin Indian tribe. He's also related to the main character of your first book. Tell me about that.
Well, my first book I ever published was in 1998, and it was called The Temagami Factor. And that was a book about acid rain, which was a big problem back then as our lakes and rivers and ponds were being literally destroyed of being habitable for all the biodiversity that depends on them. The character in that was the father of the current Blackhawk. It was Christopher Blackhawk. This is Thomas Blackhawk. And so he sort of picked up the mantle 20 years later, and he is sort of carrying on his father's and the beliefs of Native Americans.
Explain the tie-in with the coal industry.
In the Temagami Factor of 1998, Christopher Blackhawk's nemesis is a coal baron, because pollutants that come out of the chimneys of the coal mines of the Midwest are carried on the westerly winds, and they destroy the lakes and forests in the Northeast. And so the nemesis of Christopher Blackhawk is a fellow by the name of Jonas Harding, who is a coal baron. Well, in this book, the son of Christopher Blackhawk now is dealing with the son of Jonas Harding, and the son is beginning to realize the damage that his mining has done over the years, not only to the environment, but to the health of his workers as well. And so the coal mining and the Christopher Blackhawk environmentalism get together and try to figure out how can we do things in a more sustainable fashion.
Well, you say he works tirelessly to explain what's required for our survival. what would be the most important requirement?
The thing that we don't pay that much attention to now is everything we do when making consumption choices is really a combination of procuring and consuming natural resources, and then ultimately disposing these same natural resources. And all of that consumption and disposal requires that we use land, water, and the atmosphere to really procure and dispose of our lifestyle choices. So in the book, I talk about those lifestyle choices, how we're going to have to change. Let's put it this way: lifestyle is a function of income. It's been proven over and over again. Obviously, the more money you have, the more you consume, the more you dispose. He talks about the rich nations of the world will have to moderate their consumption patterns. And that's going to be not a happy topic with an awful lot of people. Everything that we consume eventually has to be disposed of. And everything that we consume has to be dug out of the earth, cut down from the earth, removed from the earth, removed from all the biodiversity on the planet. And so the more we consume, the more we dig and we mine and we cut. And then after all of that, we end up disposing of it because we're a very disposable society now. And that all goes into the atmosphere or the oceans or the lakes and etc.
I just want to clarify real quick that your first book was not published with Page, but this book stands alone.
You don't need to read the first book. It stands alone because there are enough references back to Christopher Black Hawk, back to Native American spirituality,
okay,
and how that deals with the environment as opposed to how we're dealing with the environment today.
And you got to experience that spirituality firsthand, didn't you?
Back when I wrote the Temagami Factor, I made a point of going to Canada and spending time with his tribe, the tribe that I ascribed that he came from in my book, and sat with a number of those folks and sat in sweat lodges, and it was a great experience to understand Native American spirituality when it came to the planet.
I'll bet it was. Now, you were a college professor in your former life. Has that helped you get the word out about the book?
Actually, today I'm heading over to a new Barnes & Noble that just opened in one of our malls, and I'm going to try to set up a book signing and author talk. I did that for the Temagami Factor back in '98 at Barnes & Noble. I've given talks to our local writing society. It's called Writers and Books here in the Rochester area, and then at the college as well.
And book clubs. I'm hearing so much about book clubs lately.
Mm-hmm. It's been very enjoyable. I've done that with a couple of book clubs, and just to sit and talk about writing in general, because most of the people in book clubs, or not most of the people, but a good number of people in book clubs are also, they want to write, and they want to know what that process is all about. And so it's just been very enjoyable sitting with book clubs. Yes.
Any advice for aspiring authors listening right now?
My advice, Alice, would be in terms of you've got to love the process. It's going to be your family for the next a year or two as you move through your book. You've got to love the dialogue. You got to love your characters. You got to love the storyline. So my advice is, be prepared for the long, the long slog, if you will, because you're going to sit for hundreds, if not thousands, of hours between. It's just going to be you and your laptop, and you gotta love it.
Got to love your topic too, right? I mean, you are passionate about this.
Yeah, absolutely. I said somewhere in one of my talks that for reasons unknown, I was raised Roman Catholic, and when you're 12 years old, you make your confirmation, and you have to pick out a patron saint. And for reasons unknown, I picked out St. Francis of Assisi, who is the patron saint of ecology and wildlife. And it was very prophetic because all of my adult life I've been out in the woods and the mountains and the streams and kayaking and mountain climbing, etc. And currently I have a herd of 11 deer that come every night and let me mingle among them. And we can hand feed the squirrels and the chipmunks here out the back door because they trust us now. So this I don't know if you've ever seen this, the statue of St. Francis of Assisi. He has his arms raised, and all the animals are the birds are on his arms, and the fox and the squirrel, etc., at his feet, etc. So it's been broke. It's been. My books have had a lot to do with my environmental interests.
I think you found your purpose, Raymond C. Shea. So listen, I have a feeling you're going to keep writing, and I might be talking to you again.
Well, now that you mention it, I have my latest book out is a totally different topic, but because I was a poli-sci professor as well, economics, it's called Our Next Civil War, and I'm promoting the heck out of it right now because within the next 9 months, one way or the other, I truly believe we are headed into a civil war. And this book is lots of very specific things that you can do about it, that people can do about it. So once again, it's a novel because I put everything, even my non-fictional stuff, I put it in the format of the novel because the novel, provides all the elements of a novel, love and dreams and deceit and sometimes murder and hopes, and people get a full body experience if they read one of my novels, even if it's about a non-fictional topic like the Civil War.
Yeah, don't get me started there. We're living in a very scary
our
time.
Next Civil War is it's look it up.
Yeah. All right. Listen, thank you so much. I enjoyed this.
Hey, Alice, thank you so much.
Naomi Main had a diary when she was a teenager and enjoyed writing throughout her life, but it was the death of her husband that inspired her to publish An American Girl based on a true story.
Yeah, it was. It was the year after my husband passed away. I never thought that I was going to write a book, and it was the year of 2020, and I listened to so many people that we knew, neighbors and friends and family and acquaintances and coworkers and people we knew through American Legion. Mark was greatly involved in that organization. And I would hear them tell these stories about Mark, about how he had greatly influenced them or he had greatly influenced their children. He was a masonry builder. And so sometimes he did work for people. But regardless of how he knew the person, they told me these stories I'd never heard about him before. And, of course, I knew what an amazing man he was because he loved me really well. But, and I knew that he influenced other people, but I had no clue how much. And, of course, at the same time, I'm going through that year and I'm like slogging through the grief, and I'm thinking back over our years together, how I met him. And I had a boyfriend, but he just kind of sucked me right in, and he was getting ready to take off and go to Vietnam, and I love the Lord, and the Lord began to speak to me and say, I orchestrated you guys. I orchestrated Sharon and Mark. And so, like, people were pointing out to me, I had a good story to tell, but so was the Lord telling me, you have a good story to tell, and people will be interested in it, and it will impact people's lives. So I kind of believe from the very beginning of writing this book that it was going to be successful, and or I never would have written it.
Well, I think it's interesting that you write about everything. Like in your synopsis, it says that you didn't really pursue the relationship seriously until your early 40s. And then there were some issues, like your marriage was not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody who says they don't have issues in their marriage, I don't want to know. I don't want to talk to you.
Right.
Because you're full of it. Okay.
Because they're not telling the truth.
They're not telling the truth. But when you look back, when you lose someone that you love so much and you look back on those times that were difficult.
Right.
How does that feel?
Well, when we met, we called ourselves Christians. And we said we believed in God and we believed Jesus is the Son of God, but we didn't go to church and we really didn't acknowledge God in our life. Now, what I could look back and see was that even though we did that, the Lord was always, I made a lot of foolish choices early in our marriage, early in our relationship and marriage. And the Lord was always helping me make a wise choice that kept me in the relationship, even though I seemed to be like destroying it sometimes, and kept me in our marriage, because I even recommended at one point that we separate, and we did. But the Lord really talked to me, and I came to the conclusion, because I didn't think I really had a lot of wisdom at the time, but I did get wisdom, and we started over. And we still did not really acknowledge the Lord in our life at that time. But there was a period in the early 1990s, and my husband being in Vietnam, that changed him greatly. And there's all the PTS stuff, the post-traumatic stress stuff that is talked about today. That wasn't talked about back in 1970 when he came home, and so the issues that he had, we didn't understand why he had them. And a lot of them because he didn't deal with the trauma of being over there in a place where he killed people and, death was all around him. And the way they medicated it was, booze or drugs. And so we didn't understand that had an effect on our life. And then we didn't have children, and we wanted to have children, and we did many things to have children, even adopt, and they didn't work out. So that affected our life. But ultimately, there was this 6-year period when 5 people significant in our life passed away, and both of us saw our jobs in chaos. We were definitely going to lose the way we made a living. And the last person that passed away was my husband's very best and dearest friend, who, if 2 men can be soulmates and be friends, my husband and this man were. They were the next door neighbors when we moved in that we became close friends with and adopted their family. And we went everywhere together, and we did everything together. And this man passed away at the age of 49 of a heart attack unexpectedly. And that just brought back all that trauma with my husband. And so we were just kind of going through all that again. And then we were starting to understand what was going on. And so I said, I think I need to get myself right with the Lord. That's when I started to surrender my life. Took Mark a little bit longer, but the death of that friend really changed our life forever. And we had to work through that, and we did, because we were, at that point in our marriage, we were determined. Divorce wasn't in our vocabulary. We were determined we were going to work through it. And it wasn't necessarily fun, but it was worth it.
It's hard work to stay together. It's hard work.
And, part of it in my mind is, first of all, selfish individuals do not look out for anybody but themselves. And in a relationship, a marriage, my husband was not a selfish individual, but I was. And I had to change. And then we had determined we took our vows seriously. How you go to weddings all the time, and they ask you to give advice to the new bride and groom, right? And I always say, think about the other person before you think about yourself. Put them above you. And my husband did that from the day I met him. I had to learn to do that. So when we're not selfish and we take our vows seriously, we're willing to slog through all that crap sometimes that comes our way.
Yeah. Now, this had to be very therapeutic for you to write this book at the time that you did.
That's the truth. I did not see that when I decided to write the book. But by the time I got through the editing and the page designing with Fulton Books and, the things I was doing to fine-tune it, because I had a hard time moving forward without my husband. I didn't want to be Sharon alone. I'd been Mark and Sharon for so long. I didn't want to be Sharon alone. And then, after the book was actually right before I received a hard copy in my hands, I realized, oh my goodness, this is my total healing. This is how I can move on. But he's been gone for 4 years. It took me a long time to realize that.
Is there a message in your book? Is the message about moving on?
I think there's a few messages in my book, actually. One of them is, I think, what does a good man look like? My husband was he was a masculine man. I called him a man's man. He really enjoyed being around his guy friends, but he also knew that God created him to love one woman, and that was me. And he did that totally well. But he was thoughtful from the beginning. When I first met him, he was more thoughtful than any young man I had ever met. He was so funny and humorous and fun to talk to. When he got involved with the American Legion, he was always getting involved in these programs that were about children. And if he did one thing in his life constantly, it was always trying to make things better. So he was about making our marriage better. It was about making our home better, our property, his work. So, that's one thing. People will say, what is an example of a good man? I think a man or a woman, either one, can see that in how I portray him. And then I think people can see what I kind of talked about, about being not selfish in your marriage and taking your vows seriously. What does a good marriage look like? Yeah, I show you all what I say in my About the Book. I share the beautiful, the distressing, and the unattractive of my journey, because I think everybody's story has that in it. But I think in the long run, what you're going to see is the beautiful, because, for us, it was because God directed our life in so many ways. And then I think people will see how God wants a relationship with his creation. That's what we are. We are his creation. And he's always wooing us to come and see what a relationship with me is going to be like. He did that throughout our life. I think that is very evident in the book. And my husband lived by biblical principles all of his life, whether he knew it in the beginning or not. I mean, he did know it in the end, but he didn't know it in the beginning. So I think that people can see that the Bible really is a guide to life. I think probably a lot of Christians might say today the Bible's obsolete, but it's not. It is as beneficial for today, what we go through, as it was 2,000 years ago, because in the book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun. And what he meant by that was, what we face today is no different than what people faced 2,000 years ago. So I think people will see that in my book as well. I really think it will impact people's lives.
So when you got it in the mail, how excited were you?
I have to say I was excited when I got it. Probably for me, anticipation of anything is greater than the actuality of it.
Yes.
And,
yes.
And that maybe is something you learn as you get older. I'm not sure I knew that when I was younger, but I was excited to have it. And probably the reason I was excited was because I didn't really have a lot of family members that were encouraging me. There were some, but not a lot. And I don't believe that even, all of our friends really thought, this would really happen. So it made me excited to say, hey, I did what I said I was going to do, and here it is. And yes, it really is a good story.
Good for you.
I do think it was one of my finest accomplishments in life, but the reason it is because living life well is probably the greatest accomplishment, and that's what I got to share, that we lived life well. We stayed the course. Mark should never left the earth when he did, but he did. We weren't done yet, but we stayed the course. And, even through the journey of cancer that we walked through, which turned out to be a result of his being in Vietnam, even that we did well.
What kind of cancer?
It was colon cancer, and it was determined actually after he passed away that it was a result of his time in Vietnam, exposure to Agent Orange. So, yeah, took 50 years.
I'm sorry. I'm very sorry about that.
Thank you. My life without my husband's going to be far different than it was with Mark. So I think possibly there could be a sequel.
So are you talking about your book?
Well, I made arrangements to do a book signing with a local store in the town where I live. And I live in a county called Carroll County, and there's a magazine called Carroll Magazine. And it really just highlights, what goes on in the county and people. And so I sent a complimentary copy to the editor, and she's reading that. And I believe she will interview me. And then that will be some advertisement to do the book signing. And we also have a local bookstore that I approached them about carrying the book and doing some kind of event for me. And of course, I started writing the beginning of 21, so this really was just published December of 23. And so I've talked about it, at my church, with my neighbors. Oh my goodness. I think every neighbor on my road has bought a book. And I run into them and they say, oh, I'm reading your book right now. So wherever I go, I had talked about it while I was writing it. So now I take it with me and I show that I've written it. I guess I'm pretty bold about that because I went to a baby shower just like a weekend ago, and those neighbors were saying, let us know when it's out there. And I wasn't like friends with them on Facebook or anything, so I took the book with me to the baby shower. And I met a lady from Louisiana, and she took a picture of the book. I met a lady from Arizona, and she took a picture of the book. She says, oh my gosh, I have to go buy this. There are some marketing things, that Fulton said they would arrange for me. So that's kind of where I am. I've gotten a lot of people contacting me saying, we want to do this, we want to do that. Well, I'm not like jumping at everything, but I am carefully considering things. I did do a video interview with someone, and that is on YouTube now. And I did create my own website about myself and the book, and that's out there. So I am doing some things.
You're doing everything you're supposed to be doing. You're doing great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Maybe we'll talk again.
Okay, maybe we will.
Have a great day.
Thank you, Alice. It's been my pleasure.
When Shirley Burton hears something interesting, she takes notes on napkins if she has to, and then files those away for future inspiration. She's written 3 books, but this is her first for Fulton, entitled Misfire, a story of Ginger Phillips based on a true story, right?
Yes, it's a true story that a alchemy psychologist told me in a session one time with her that I was definitely Aphrodite. And that just really shook me up. And so I became interested in gods and goddesses and read and studied. And so the idea that Ginger Phillips' life became a mythology, or her life happened because of fate or destiny, was a result of the study I did of gods and goddesses. And I thought, well, I've got to find out about Aphrodite.
Who is Ginger Phillips?
Well, she's a fictional character, and the thought has occurred to me that she could have a sequel. I could use her as a lot of detective stories. They have a individual detective that it goes through several books. And I thought, Ginger Phillips could stay alive for a while, maybe another book.
What's this book about?
Well, it's about Ginger Phillips and Brad Clark, 2 totally opposite people trying to make a marriage work. And it's the ups and downs, and they're so different. How did they come together? It had to be an archetypal thing that brought them together, maybe to have the 2 girls that they had. It's just a story of Ginger and Brad's journey through their life once they married.
So her study of mythology indicated that Hera, goddess of marriage, was active throughout her life.
Very, very much so.
How so?
Well, by using gods and goddesses to correlate what the individuals were going through, Hera, the goddess of marriage, was a big influence on Ginger. And I, as the author, decided Brad, through his actions and personality, seemed to be more of Dionysius, because Dionysius was against marriage and the marriage work that the female had to do. He was a fly-by-night kind of guy, and he wanted his partner, woman, to do whatever he wanted to do. I mean, she couldn't have responsibility for the house and the work that a normal wife does. So he was very much against marriage as Hera saw it and Ginger saw it.
Still, they married. And what was their conflict? What was their major source of conflict?
Their major source of conflict was Ginger was very limited in knowledge about the sexual relationship in a marriage. Now, Brad was pretty much lusting. He lusted after Ginger, and she didn't like that. It was ignorance on their part of how to have an intimacy in marriage. So that was a problem throughout their marriage. He was thinking that way, and she was not thinking that way. She had work to do.
Didn't they talk? I mean, come on.
Oh, they talked a lot. I mean, they had happy hours in the evening throughout their marriage and talked about life. And Ginger appreciated Brad because he was a listener. And when they would have their cocktails and talk, she did most of the talking. And he was a good listener. And he was probably wanting to make her relax more so their intimacy could develop. But their intimacy did not develop strong enough to keep the marriage together.
All right. So you think that there's more life in Ginger?
Yes.
The name of your book is Misfire, so I'm assuming things don't work out great.
Yes. And determining the title, misfire, you usually think of a gun misfiring, but anything that doesn't turn out to be the way it should or you patterned it is a misfire. So that's how I came up with the title.
You expect to write a sequel to this book?
Well, I'm thinking that's a possibility.
Okay.
Because she has another life now, and it might be interesting. She could maybe meet someone else, even though she's gotten quite old, and learn what intimacy is really about. And, I mean, she could still learn from her marriage.
Right. Well, that's the whole point. We got to learn.
That's right.
In order to move forward, right?
Uh-huh.
I just wanted to ask you, are you doing anything to promote your book?
Yes, I am in a retirement community. My book is featured in the library here. I've put my book on my Facebook page. I belong to the Rotary Club, which I hope to visit and introduce my book there. So I'm doing what I can, but I appreciate Fulton Books' marketing plan, which I purchased from them, to also utilize their social network and means of contacting other publishers, I hope. I thought the press release was excellent, and so I have sent that press release to different sources that could make use of it to advertise the book.
Well, you're doing all the right stuff, Shirley.
Well, thank you.
You have a great day. That's your real name, right?
It is. That's my real name. I was named after Shirley Temple, of course.
Of course.
Of course.
Of course you were. Shirley Temple and Richard Burton.
Yeah. Exactly. And, you know, his first wife was named Shirley.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yes, I did know that.
Mm-hmm.
You are too funny. You keep writing.
Okay. Thank you, Alice.
You got it. Bye-bye.
Bye.
iamonewaydre is the name of our next author, and he's written a children's book entitled Look at Me, and I am so happy you are so excited about this interview.
Yes, I am. This is big for me because, like, it's my first published book. I published a book online. It's an ebook. I published it online, and it really went somewhere. So this step right here being interviewed for a book, everybody looking at my book is just so inspiring for me.
What are you doing?
I'm actually promoting on a website called Live Me. I go live, I read my book, I present the websites and everything that I need to like promote it,
It's
and like a broadcasting site.
How did you find it?
I found that website by going through my cousin. He was actually live one day, and I said, "What's that?" And I looked at it as a platform to, um, promote, to show your talent, and that's what I took it as, and that's what I do. So that's how I became to be a writer. That is mostly what I get on as far as social media.
This is great information for first time authors just like you.
Ah, that's amazing. Congratulations.
Because really, no, everybody will say, I thought the hardest part was writing the book. And then, when you start the marketing part, and that's not to say that there's not some marketing done for you, but what people don't seem to understand is that if you're not getting behind your book, it's not going to fly.
Right. You have to take the first step to have the fan base, to have the persona for somebody else to want it. If you don't want it, nobody else will. And I learned that from my daughter actually writing my first book. What got me there, I wrote my first book back in 2000. I was still in high school. I started writing a adult suspense. And after I wrote the adult suspense, I had children. And my firstborn, she liked school, but my daughter, my secondborn, she didn't want to read. She didn't want to learn how to write or anything. So I wrote a book called Zoo Trip, and I presented it to her, and that was that. We went from there. She wanted to read. She learned. We learned how to read. Now we're teaching my son how to read with this book.
Look at Me is the name of this book.
Yes. Look at Me is about encouraging our children to explore the imagination, to inspire them to thrive with their parents' engagement. So, like, because I looked at the things that I had in my life as far as my mom going to the army, and my dad could draw really good, my sister could draw. I had uncles that was mechanics and everything. So I just put all of these into the book. I wrote a couple of ideas down, and then I just wrote the book, and good. It came out better than I expected.
Can you take me through the book? Do we follow a character through the book?
I didn't want to single out a single character. You open the first page, you'll see a mother and daughter. And the daughter, she's trying to get her mother to look at her to see her potential. She like, the first thing I did as a child was try to be what my mother, or try to be what my father was. And she was in the army. So the child sees that the mother is in the army and wants to be that, but the mother doesn't pay attention. She's too far into her job, her career. The next page, we have the brother. And I wanted to take only two or three characters. I didn't want to do a lot of characters, for the fact that I just wanted the kids to see that they can bring out whatever they was trying to be. So the brother, he wants the dad, he wants the dad to look at him be a mechanic. He could work on, he likes cars. Not as far as he can work on cars. He likes cars. He sees his dad work on cars, and that's what he wants to start. But the dad is under the car, too busy to pay attention to the son.
So you really hit on some of the feelings that kids go through when they're trying to get a loved one's attention. Does your book tell them how to get the attention? Or is it just a wake-up call for whoever's reading the book to them to say, hey, are you paying attention?
The kids do open up a little bit more as far as in speaking out about what they want to be in life. They do get the attention at the end. They put all the parents and mothers in one room, and they explain, hey, look, I did all these things and nobody looked. But now you can look and see that I could do anything.
What a sweet book.
Thank you.
Now, I got to ask you, iamonewaydre cannot possibly be your real name. iamonewaydre.
No, that is my name, my internet name. Online, just my persona to the world.
Well, where did that come from?
It's actually a acronym. One way stands for obtain no equal, work all year. Really, my friends at school gave me one. They start calling me one, O-N-E, and I took that and added I am, because I wanted to, I wanted the world to know, like, as far it's about your words. If you speak I am into existence, then you are. But so that's why I wanted I am to be recognized. One way came from my friends, and everybody, they call me one. So I don't know why, they just call me one.
Are you able to read to kids, or can you get this into the schools? Or
my mother is actually working on getting me to read in front of the library. She worked at a library most of my life, most of my childhood. She was working at a library. So getting into book readings, that's kind of will be easy for me. Once I find a little bit more time. I'm working on the time schedule now.
Well, you have a great imagination, and you've written a really beautiful book here.
Thank you so much.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. We hope to see you back here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.